Thank you very much. It is wonderful to be with you today. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Let me say especially to all the kids, thanks for being here today. Anyone in this room 5 years old? You're 5? Excellent. I have a little girl at home who's 5. Her name is Caroline. And I have a little girl at home who's 3. Is anyone here 3? Anyone 3? Oh, back there. Hi. So Catherine at home is 3. I'll tell you, back in 2012, when we were running the Senate campaign, Caroline was at the time, she was 4. And I remember one morning, it was a Saturday morning, about 6 in the morning, and I was up on the phone doing the radio interview. And Caroline woke up and she came bursting into the room to come play with Mom and Dad. And Heidi jumped out of bed, she ran over, grabbed Caroline, she swooped her out of the room to take her to the living room because I was on a radio interview. And Caroline heard that, and she crossed her arms. She stomped away and she said, "Politics, politics, politics. It's always politics." So for each of you that was invited to come here today, each of you kids, welcome to the intersection of politics and something whole lot important. What y'all are here for today is a lot more important than the political nonsense that goes back and forth. You know, Sunday from the pulpit, a lot of times, your pastor will go back to the original Greek, the New Testament. If you look at the original Greek behind the word politics, there are 2 parts. Poly, meaning many, and ticks, meaning blood-sucking parasites. And that is a pretty accurate description of the way Washington works. But y'all are here today for something a whole lot more important. What I want to talk about today is 3 things. Number 1, our kids. Number 2, educational choice. And number 3, religious liberty. Let's start with our kids. The reason every single parent is here, the reason every single grandparent is here, is because we love our children. We love our children and we take seriously the biblical admonition to raise them up, to walk in a godly path. I want to start by just thanking each of the home educators. Thank you for the commitment, the financial commitment you give by not being in the paid workplace, the commitment of time, the commitment of energy, the commitment of passion for your kids. And if I could for just a minute speak on behalf of your children just to say thank you. What you are doing is making a difference, and it's a difference that will be felt for generations to come. Their children and their children's children will thank you for the impact you're having on your kids, preparing them to go forward in this way. Under our Constitution, it is a fundamental right of every parent to bring up and raise and educate your children. That is a fundamental right that is protected in our Constitution, and I want to congratulate each of you on a terrific victory in the Iowa legislature last year protecting the rights of homeschooling. The men and women and boys and girls in this room mobilized. And you went to your legislature, you went to Republicans and Democrats. You said, forget about party lines. Who cares what party you are? Kids are bipartisan. And the Constitution should be bipartisan. And protecting the rights of every parent to raise his or her child should be bipartisan, and you won a major victory here. Now, at the same time, I think we need to guard against efforts that would undermine the rights of parents to raise their children. Serving in the Senate, one that is particularly relevant we need to do everything humanly possible to prevent ratification of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Nothing in international law, nothing in any treaty should be used as a backdoor vehicle to undermine the rights of every parent here to raise your children consistent with your faith, with your good judgment, and the love you have for your children. You know, I'm reminded of one of my favorite senators who ever served, Senator Phil Gramm, former senator from Texas. And there was a Senate hearing in which there was a young, I think very well-meaning, liberal fellow. He was testifying. And Senator Graham said something to the effect of, parents know their children and love their children more than anybody else does. And this well-meaning liberal actually piped up and said, Senator, I disagree. I care about your children every bit as much as you do. And Phil Gramm smiled. And with a twinkle in his eye, he said, really? What are their names? We need to stand up for our children. Second thing I want to talk about is educational choice. For decades, I have been a passionate fan of educational choice, of maximizing the choices that are available for every parent, whether it is public schools, whether it is private schools, whether it is charter schools, whether it is scholarships, whether it is homeschooling. We should see 1,000 flowers bloom. I'm convinced school choice is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. Every single child deserves an opportunity to have an excellent education. You look at right now the conditions in many neighborhoods throughout this country, many low-income neighborhoods, many minority neighborhoods, where there are children who are trapped in schools where they don't have good opportunities, they don't have the chance to learn. And as everyone here knows, and you know because you have committed yourself to it, education is foundational to every other challenge you've got. If you're looking at issues of crime or poverty or health care, if you have education, if you get the foundation of an education, all of those problems, by and large, can take care of themselves. But if a child doesn't get an education, we know, like night follows day, far too many of them will see issues of crime and poverty and health issues that will follow directly from it. I got to say, look, I know this firsthand in my family. My mother is Irish Catholic, Italian, raised in an Irish-Italian home in Delaware. She came from a family where her mother was the second youngest of 17 kids. My mom was the first one ever to go to college. She went to Rice in the 1950s, studied math, became a pioneering computer programmer. My dad is Cuban. Grew up in Cuba, was imprisoned and tortured. All right, anyone in this room 14? All right, everyone who's 14, raise your hand. All right, when my father was 14 years old, he started fighting the Cuban Revolution. Can you imagine being part of a revolution at 14? What was interesting in Cuba, you know where the revolution started? It started in the student councils. So the high school and college student councils were the first revolutionaries in Cuba. And my dad spent 4 years fighting in the revolution. He was thrown in prison and tortured as a teenager. And he fled Cuba in 1957. He came to Texas. He was 18. He had $100 sewn into his uncle. I don't actually advise carrying money. Kind of nasty. But he got a job washing dishes, made 50 cents an hour, and paid his way through the University of Texas. And it was getting an education. He came here and learned English and got an education, and he went on and got a job. He started a small business. He climbed towards the American dream. Today, my dad is a pastor north of Dallas. That's the American story. That is all of us. Every one of us in this room, we are the children of those who risk everything for freedom. And that, I'm going to suggest to you, is the fundamental DNA of what it means to be an American, to value freedom and opportunity above all else. And that leads to the third thing I want to talk about, which is religious liberty. There are a great many challenges in this country right now. There is the challenge of restoring jobs and economic growth, which is absolutely vital. There's a challenge of reining in spending and debt that is threatening our kids, which is absolutely vital. But there is also the challenge of our constitutional liberties being undermined. And there is no liberty more important than our religious liberty. That's right. There is a reason that the very first thing protected in the First Amendment to the Bill of Rights is our religious liberty. I've been blessed to have had the opportunity for many years to play a role in helping defend our religious liberty. Before I was in the Senate, I was the Solicitor General of Texas. It's the chief lawyer for the state in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. Over and over again, we had the opportunity to defend religious liberty. In Texas, on the state capitol grounds, there's a monument to the Ten Commandments. It's been there since 1961. An individual plaintiff, an atheist, a homeless man, filed a lawsuit seeking to tear down that monument. Texas defended the Ten Commandments monument. We went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and we won 5-4. You'll all remember about the same time there was a case out of California where another atheist filed another lawsuit seeking to strike down the Pledge of Allegiance because it includes the words, "one nation under God." Texas brought together all 50 states before the U.S. Supreme Court defending the Pledge of Allegiance, and we won unanimously. And one of the cases I'm most proud of was having the opportunity to represent over 3 million veterans defending the constitutionality of the Mojave Desert Veterans Memorial. That is a memorial, a lone white Latin cross that was erected over 70 years ago to honor the men and women who gave their lives in World War I. The ACLU filed a lawsuit seeking to tear down that memorial. And the lower courts agreed with the ACLU and ordered that 70-year-old memorial to our veterans be taken down because you could not gaze on the image of a cross on federal lands. We went to the U.S. Supreme Court on behalf of over 3 million veterans defending the Mojave Desert Veterans Memorial, and we won 5-4. I have to tell you now, with the current administration, we have never seen an administration with such hostility to religious faith. We have seen instances of the IRS asking citizen groups, tell us what books you're reading. Tell us the content of your prayers. Let me tell you something. The federal government has no business asking any American the content of our prayers. We see men and women in the military having their religious liberty rights curtailed. Servicemen and women being told they risk discipline if they share their faith with others. No one who steps forward to defend our nation, to risk their life, to defend our constitutional rights, sacrifices their constitutional rights, of course. That's right.
Right.
You know, last year there was a chaplain in the Air Force up in Alaska who wrote in a blog post the phrase, "There are no atheists in foxholes." he was ordered by his supervising officer to take it down. I guess it was deemed insensitive to atheists. I kind of thought it was the job of the chaplain to be insensitive to atheists.
Yeah.
To welcome them into the forgiving arms of a loving God. It's very interesting where that phrase, "there are no atheists in foxholes," comes from. It comes from a 1954 speech that was given by Dwight D. Eisenhower to the American Legion National Convention. Dwight D. Eisenhower, a man I might note had some passing familiarity with the military. In that speech, Dwight D. Eisenhower recounted the story of what is known as the four immortal chaplains. These are four chaplains that were serving aboard the USS Dorchester in World War II when the ship was hit with a torpedo from a German U-boat. And as the ship was going down, they realized to their horror there were not enough life vests to save every man aboard the ship. There were four chaplains on the Dorchester, two who were Protestant, one who was Catholic, and one who was Jewish. Each of those four chaplains gave their life vest to another man. And the four of them, arm in arm, sang hymns and went down with the ship. And the origin of that story is that when they were handing their life vest to someone else, they didn't ask that person, "Are you a Protestant? Are you a Catholic? Are you a Jew?" They simply stepped forward to save the life of their brother and to sacrifice for another man. That's the origin of the phrase, "there are no atheists in foxholes." And the idea that the federal government is trying to muzzle telling the story of our religious tradition and faith and history is entirely backwards from who we are as Americans. And you know, there is no example more egregious than what's happening to the Little Sisters of the Poor. The Little Sisters of the Poor are a Catholic convent of nuns who've taken a vow of poverty, and they devote their lives to caring for the poor and the elderly and helping provide health care. As we stand here today, right now, the Obama administration is litigating against the Little Sisters of the Poor, trying to impose millions of dollars of fines on them because they're unwilling to pay for contraceptives that their faith teaches them they shouldn't pay. You think of a nation where this nation was founded by men and women fleeing religious oppression and coming here seeking the freedom to seek out the Lord God Almighty with all of our hearts, minds, and souls, free of the government getting in the way. How misguided have we gotten? How through the looking glass have we gone when the federal government is now trying to force private citizens to violate their religious beliefs? It's wrong, and it's unconstitutional. I want to close with a word of admonition. Each of you are here because you're committed to your kids, because you're committed to education, because you're committed to the Constitution and to religious liberty, and because you're committed to action. You know, we just had 2 days ago the Jewish celebration of Purim, which reflects the time that God spared the people of Israel from Haman's plan to murder them. The people of Israel were spared because Esther found herself in a position to stand up and say, "These are my people." Now, when she opened her mouth, she put herself at considerable risk. The story of Purim is a story of action, of stepping forward on your faith, having the conviction of your faith, and acting on your faith. There's a story my father tells from the pulpit of a tightrope walker who erects a tightrope across a gigantic waterfall. And a crowd assembles to watch the tightrope walker. And he asks the crowd, he says, "How many of you believe I can walk across the tightrope and back?" The crowd all cheers, and he doesn't. He says, "Okay, how many of you think I can walk across the tightrope and back pushing a wheelbarrow?" The crowd all cheers, and he doesn't. He says, "How many of you believe I can walk across the tightrope and back pushing a wheelbarrow with two 100-pound bags of sand in the wheelbarrow?" The crowd all cheers, and he doesn't. He says, "Okay, how many of you believe I can walk across the tightrope and back with a man in the wheelbarrow?" The crowd cheers, and he points to a man in the front row and he says, "Get in the wheelbarrow." And of course, the lesson of that story is that believing isn't sitting there quietly doing a little golf clap. Believing, whether it is with respect to salvation or whether it is with respect to standing up for your principles, is getting in the wheelbarrow. Is stepping forward with everything you have and saying, just like Esther, "I am here for a time such as this." That's why each of you is here, and it's why I'm honored and blessed to be with you. God bless you.